You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with a Business Unlimited smartphone plan. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second internet plan with savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Or is this Weird Libertarians? Who knows anymore? It all runs together, but thanks so much for joining us here on the program. Going to talk about Robert Kennedy Jr. dropping out of the race, and we're going to talk about Barack Obama's speech at the DNC. Basically, this is the... Well, how do I put it? What is and what everybody would like to be. Right? So we'll start with the what is with Robert Kennedy Jr. So Robert Kennedy Jr., if you don't know, he's running for president. He is the son of Bobby Kennedy, who was the brother of JFK, and famous Democratic family. And he is running for president. He started running in the Democratic Party, then eventually got frustrated, dropped out, became an independent, flirted with the Libertarian Party at one point, flirted with the... Now he's endorsing Trump, so he's kind of been all over the map. And he also put a dead bear in Central Park, which, as funny as Donald Trump is, that is the funniest thing that's happened in this election cycle. Go look that up. We won't play the video. But Robert Kennedy Jr. announcing yesterday that he is suspending his campaign. He's dropping out of 10 swing states, but he is staying on the ballot in states that aren't close. And he is suspending his campaign instead of closing it, which means he can continue to take donations. So Robert Kennedy Jr. is head of the, I believe it's called the Children's Defense Fund. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he is probably, I think his reputation when he dies will be pushing the anti-vax movement. I think that's a lot of why many people from the left, the right, the center, the libertarians have supported his campaign is single-issue voting. So they'll presumably go to Trump, but that's complicated. With me today is Rhinehold. Rhinehold, good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be back doing this.
Yes, I know you'll be tortured with RFK, but then you get to watch Barack Obama speak, so you should be happy. And go ahead.
It's a fun time.
Yes, and then also joining us is Hodey Johns. Hodey, how are you?
Oh, I am so good, Chris. Thank you for asking.
I almost thought, is Hodey Johns his last name? Because I just call you Hodey. Like, it's just sort of your name.
The Johns, it's so proper. It's so British. It doesn't sound like it belongs there. It should be like Hodey Houday. You know, it would be much better.
Didn't he kidnap people in Nigeria or something? Okay.
Hodey's Army.
So Robert Kennedy Jr. gave a press conference, and we're going to react to a couple videos. The first video is a chunk of Robert Kennedy Jr.'s press conference that I thought was spot on in many ways, about the media, about the two-party system, and then we're also going to play a clip of Barack Obama speaking at the DNC convention this week, and I'd like to title these two, What is the Reality of Politics Today, and then What People Aspire Politics to Be through Barack Obama. Because I think he gave a great articulation of a lot of problems while also scolding Democrats, which I think you'll find interesting. So let's pull up the Robert Kennedy Jr. press conference.
I believe that I would have won the election.
So I'm used to having to hit play. So here's Robert Kennedy Jr. about 7-8 minutes into his press conference. So Hodey, Rhinehold, we don't do a lot of reaction videos here. So if you've got something just to say, hey, pause, wave your hand, whatever, and then interject something, and we'll go along the way. This is like a 6-minute clip, so we'll try not to make it take an hour.
In an honest system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system the kind that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates, with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debates, with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship. In a system of nonpartisan courts and election boards, everything would be different. After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups.
Now, a lot of what he's talking about is to get into the debates, for instance, you have to be at 15% of the vote. And that's the Commission on Presidential Debates, which will operate some debates later in the year in September. But the initial debate with Trump and Biden was a straight-to-the-media outlet debate. Media outlets set the debate. They negotiate terms with the candidates. They can set their own rules. The Commission on Presidential Debates has its own set of rules that have been negotiated out over time by the two parties, and they tend to keep third-party candidates out. Robert Kennedy Jr. was starting to qualify for some of those debates, and the Democrats kneecapped him. And again, remember, he was running in the Democratic primary, and he was making Joe Biden nervous in certain ways. So if you're trying to get on the ballot, you have 50 different ways to get on the ballot. There's ballot access in every state, controlled by the election division and the legislatures in all 50 states, and then even down to some counties, right? So in some states, 2% of the presidential race gets you on the ballot, which is almost impossible. Gary Johnson did it, which is why he's the most successful candidate to ever run for president as a libertarian. And then you, in Indiana, for instance, 2% in the Secretary of State's race. And in other places, it's just petitioning. You've got to go through and get 5,000 signatures in every congressional district, which means you really have to get 15,000 because the other two parties have a ton of lawyers who come in and challenge, and people write down Mickey Mouse. So it's very complicated to get onto the ballot. You also have to pay for petitioners. And this particular race, with so many third-party candidates on the ballot or competing, you've got Cornel West, you've got the Constitution Party. I forget his name. I think he's run a few times. Terrell, maybe. You've got, I said Cornel West. You've got Jill Stein in the Green Party, Chase Oliver in the Libertarians. You had Kennedy putting together his own organization. So paid petitioners, people who will work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 or more, go to events, stand outside of grocery stores, ask people to get petitions, know what a good petition signature looks like. I forget the number. Maybe you guys have seen it. But the number was like $1 a signature, and now it's like $10 a signature, or it was some big increase in terms of the cost that you have to pay to get a signature. So it's very complicated to get on the ballot, and Robert Kennedy Jr. has done that. Do you know how many states he's on or was going to be on?
Well, he was wanting to be on all 50. I think that he was going to end up short of that, but I believe he got on over 30 or so before he suspended all the. So there's still some states that they're working on.
I think he said he was going to get to close to 50, right?
Yeah, he's probably realistically in the mid 40s.
Chase Oliver, the Libertarian Party candidate, said they're currently on 31 and they're projected to be on 48. So, and then write-ins in the other two, which is by far the most coverage of any of the third-party candidates. So, yeah, and
New York makes that 50 almost impossible these days.
Yeah, and New York, a Democratic state, which lends credence to a lot of what he's saying. You know, here in Indiana, John Rust went through this, Senate candidate. Jim Wallace in the past ran for governor. And what they do is they challenge enough of the signatures to get you out of qualification and then rule you, because they control the election divisions, they make up the boards. but then if you're Todd Young, for instance, and you fail to get the signatures, but you've been chosen by the party structure in the state to be the Senate candidate, they let you on the ballot, right? So the parties, because they have so many resources and so many lawyers, so much money, and so much time, therefore, that they can go through and challenge you out of the race if they want, because Democrats and Republicans write the rules of ballot access. Hodey, Rhinehold, jump in here if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, just to answer the question, RFK Jr., after he withdraws from the 10 battleground states, is going to be on the ballot in 23 states. So he was up to about 33. Chase Oliver, just because I work on the campaign and I know we're still working on Kentucky, so it's going to be 47 or 48. It's unbelievable the work that team has done without any support from the LNC. It's really, having worked on the Joe Jorgensen campaign and the Chase Oliver campaign, like the way the Chase Oliver campaign is running is incredible if they get anything done at all.
Why is that?
The second state they're going to get that they're not going to be on, aside from New York, is Illinois, which just goes to reinforce the point, like you said.
Yeah, because I think he mentions New York. Kennedy was suing New York, and then they said, tough. Why is New York so why is it hard?
They changed the rules. When they see a libertarian get on the ballot, this is very similar to the debates when Gary Johnson picked 18% for the polling. They just made it 21. And if he made that, they would have said 24%. And that's the media side of things, but New York is doing the same thing on the political side of things, that they'll just change it. If they think that you can make it impossible to make it very expensive for you to make it as well. You're in charge. So, how it would work is you submit the signatures and the petitions.
Let's get tangential. I want to hear the tea. Why is it so, between Jorgensen and Chase is Steve Dosbach, I think, ran both, right? Like, what's the, so you've got some of the same infrastructure. What's the difference?
I mean, if we want to get into this,
give me the 5-minute version.
Okay, yeah. Basically, when we would ask for resources with Joe Jorgensen, we wouldn't even have to ask. There was somebody in the Slack channels saying, hey, how can I help? What can I do? Are you visiting a place today? Can we blast this out? Can we tweet this? Like, ultimately, it was very integrated. Now, this, we made it to the point where it's just like, hey, we're going to be here tomorrow. Okay. Automatic tweet happening.
You're talking about state parties, local parties, LNC, up and down the chain.
Correct. Yes. So if we were going to be in Alabama, the Joe Jorgensen or Spike Cohen was going to do a speaking appearance at Alabama, there would be somebody in the Slack channel from Alabama who had control of the social media and would blast that out. Then there would be somebody on the national level who would tweet about it, post a Facebook post about it. It would be integrated. It would be automatic. It was just known. And so when we would schedule those things, they would say, well, how can we help? Oh, this is going to be better in this county. Hey, let's get that over to the county affiliate. And so the LNC was really taking care of a lot of that process and very active in that, to say like, hey, you guys just schedule your parents, make money. You've got plenty of work to do. We'll work on making it as, published as we possibly can. Getting this data. I mean, very up in there, just being like, hey, just so you know, this place is open. You may want to consider this.
Versus what is it like? What is it like now?
And what we have today is essentially dead silence. I don't want to say it's antagonistic so much as it is just nothing. That we will reach out to them and just be like, hey, we're going to be let's just take the same situation. Going to be in Alabama, going to be speaking here. Nothing. No interest, no information, no tweet, no post, no, like, it's like talking to a brick wall.
Is that because that infrastructure no longer exists, or is it because people just don't care because it's
a little bit of both? Financially, the LNC for the Joe Jorgensen campaign had enough to give us money on, say, data, like voter data, and that's really expensive for those who haven't seen that. It's more expensive than you think it should be. But yeah, like, had the money for stuff like that. Obviously, we're not getting that with the Chase campaign. I don't even expect it. Honestly, I felt like it was way too expensive even with the Jorgensen campaign. But I mean, so obviously the infrastructure is not there. The money's not there. I believe there was a major mainstream media post about how we're negative $10,000, and that's nuts in an election year, because usually this is when we have our best. But we paid for a Trump campaign rally, so that was a mistake. I guess they say they didn't know they were paying for that rally, but
the LNC is raising money with Robert Kennedy Jr., so we'll be saved.
And instead of raising money for Chase, now if I'm going to be maximum fair to them, I understand this thought process as well. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a fundraising machine. To your point, what you were talking about earlier with him in the polls, when you say, do you support Trump, Harris, or RFK? RFK pulls at about 1%, 3%. When you say, do you support Trump, Kennedy, or Trump, Harris, or Kennedy, and use his full last name, he goes up to about 15, 18%. Wow. Just lets you know where like the American voter's mind is at. If you say RFK versus saying RFK Jr., his polling goes up like 18%.
Well, let me go change the title of the show. Hold on.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yeah, make sure you say Kennedy.
Kennedy in all caps.
Right. So people like, he's just a money making machine, had a lot of billionaires behind him. You look at even his running mate, like just a, huge campaign, whatever. So what they see is their negative, whatever it was, $200,000 after the convention because of the Trump rally. And they're like, okay, we need some way to recoup those funds.
Because they had to pay for what? Security, mostly?
Yeah. The venue. What? I mean, yeah, the venue, from what I understand, it's mostly the hotel costs, but the hotel costs also put in security charges. The LNC is arguing that they did not know that they were going to have to pay for this. I don't know how they didn't know they were going to have to pay for it, but they do. Either way, it put them in a serious hole, because they not only are paying for the LNC to be there and people who attended the Libertarian National Convention to be there, they paid for Trump supporters to be there as well.
Yeah, so but now what? Is the Libertarian National Committee indirectly sending money to Trump?
Well, no. I want to be very clear about that, because this is kind of a legal thing now. So it's fundraising for RFK Jr. This actually could be illegal in and of itself. It's being hashed out in the courts. If RFK Jr. doesn't make it on at least one of the state ballots, from what I understand, this is actually likely illegal. It is certainly, and I'll return this back to the Chase campaign, it's certainly scummy, and I certainly don't like it. And so what's happening is they're essentially raising funds for themselves because they're in the hole. The Chase campaign isn't seeing any of this. I mean, they say they will if it works out, but with RFK Jr. now suspending his campaign, I don't see that working out. Like, they might make enough, I guess, to recoup the funds that they had for the Trump rally, but I don't know what they're going to be left with for the Chase campaign. So financially, nothing. Infrastructure, as you mentioned, destroyed. But more antagonistic and more upsetting to me, because what the biggest difference makers that I could detect from the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign was just the publicity, right? Like, this is what it was all about, is getting eyes on us. I mean, this would even affect donations, because if people have eyes on us, they're very likely to donate after attending a rally, hearing somebody speak. Like, getting people to these events is how we make the most of our money. It's not in these one-time shady deals with RFK or whatever you're doing there. The way we get most of our money is grassroots.
We meaning Chase's campaign or the LNC?
LNC in general. Like, okay. I mean, just as libertarians, the way we get most of our money isn't from one mega donor. It's from a bunch of people. And so when you see these memberships dive in and a bunch of people not doing their money anymore, that's really our lifeblood. Like, we are not the Republicans and Democrats. We don't have a federal fund to dig into, like we can't use that. So
if you get a certain percentage, then your party gets federal financing, which is the $3 you check on your taxes.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not surprised to hear any of that. I know I saw one of Chase's tweets finally. I wondered why I hadn't seen him. I haven't seen much of Chase on any social media. He's not only not being served to me, but I've not seen other people talking about him. So it's just, I sort of keep forgetting that he's in the race. Sorry, Hodey. It's just, I'm living my life, and I went to look for speeches for a new podcast feed, which is an old podcast feed called Raw Audio Politics, where I'm just ripping, audio that are publicly available feeds of speeches like this and putting the whole unedited thing into the feed so I can listen to it while I play basketball and work out. But you can listen in too if you go to subscribe to Raw Audio Politics. So I went looking for some Chase speeches, and I found two. Like at this point in 2016 for Gary Johnson, it was dozens, but it was about two in 2012 Gary Johnson's campaign. So yeah, it sort of feels like the strategy worked of moving the party backwards in order to help Trump and not get momentum. Like you could say that's a conspiracy theory, but could they have achieved it any better if it was intentional?
No, I mean, at this point, McArdle's openly rooting for Trump. I mean, she tweeted it. They retweeted it from the Libertarian Party official account, said we're still going to work with Kennedy and Trump to win this election. So, I mean, it's
remember when Angela, when Angela first started, when the whole Chase thing and he was nominated and there was a lot of pushback from Angela, it was we're going to support him on any place where he could help beat Biden.
Right.
So they were focusing on avoiding the battleground states and not pulling votes away from Trump or trying to get votes away from Biden. And so they're doing that calculation where they were openly saying, they weren't saying we're supporting Trump. They would just say, we don't want Biden in.
Right.
So that was their goal. And now that you're hearing this exact same thing come from RFK Jr., that's the same mentality, the same logistics that they're going for. Is just to beat the Democrats.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, he has a like at what point when you've been sued out of the race by the Democrats, don't you go, all right, well, the day after your nominee speaks, I'm going to steal the news cycle from her so it hurts her bounce, and I'm going to help the other guy because middle finger to you all. So I guess I don't blame him, but he lays out why he feels that way. Let's continue with Robert Kennedy Jr.
But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, for the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth.
He's talking about Joe Biden there. So they felt Biden was weak. Why are you shaking your head? Everything he just said is exactly true. Rhinehold.
Okay. No, he's going to go someplace. It's just kind of ridiculous, but that's fine.
Okay. Just wave your hand when you're ready to fact check him. If you don't know, his voice sounds weird. It's not the audio. He has a vocal cord issue that causes him to speak like that. I think it's a degenerative genetic thing. So
DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions.
By the way, not abnormal. This is why ballot access, automatic ballot access, for instance, here in Indiana, is so important. You have a set way to get on the ballot, which is 2% in the Secretary of State's race, and then none of your candidates have to get sued. But what he just described in the Republican and Democratic parties is incredibly common for independents, independent parties, and people without automatic ballot access.
It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then when that
I don't necessarily agree with, because nobody wanted to run against Biden. I mean, he did, but Democrats by and large don't seem to take him seriously. Rhinehold, is that what you were shaking your head about?
No, he's well. The first thing was him including the using the Democrats were using the courts to go after Trump. I mean, Trump committed hundreds of actual crimes that they're going after. It's not like the Democrats are specifically targeting him and using the courts to take him down.
Does Eileen Cannon not help Donald Trump, in your opinion? Why wouldn't Democratic appointed judges do the same thing? If you believe that the Republicans do one thing, then why wouldn't Democrats do the opposite?
I don't know about Eileen Cannon, whether or not it was her doing it because she was in the tank for Trump, or her doing it because she's just incompetent.
She is the judge appointed to one of Donald Trump's court
Yep.
cases, appointed by Trump. So let's move on. We got a lot
yeah.
to cover here, but we could argue all day.
Predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden. The same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate.
Can't hear you, Chris.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry about
There you
that.
go.
I had
No, you're okay.
I had hit the wrong button. I was in. Thank you. So he's not wrong. But let's tell the whole story. All right. Here's how it works. Okay, because I agree with it not being democratic that Kamala is the nominee, but this has nothing to do with democracy, right? A primary is closed party business. It's paid for by the taxpayers. When you show up to vote in a primary as a Republican or a Democrat, you're not participating in a free and open election for your representative. You're participating in the party's choice on who will be the nominee. So the party is completely within their right and ability to appoint Kamala Harris and replace Joe Biden at their convention. That's how the whole system is supposed to work because, again, it's representative democracy and at work, right? You have precinct committeemen who work into ward chairmen, who work into county chairs, who work into state central committee people, who work into, national committee members, and they're elected in those primaries or conventions all along the way over a period of years. And so your committees are supposed to reflect an accurate representation of the grassroots. And so they didn't subvert democracy by replacing her per se, but in doing it the way that they did it, they definitely, guys, left her open to this criticism, especially from a guy who was trying to participate in their primary, who is a lifelong Democrat. All right, let's keep going.
My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus. There in Chicago is a string of Democratic speakers.
Go ahead, Rhinehold.
Hodey wanted to say something. I was just trying to help get your attention.
Appreciate that, Rhinehold. So the debate, we've had 3 in a row that have changed the election completely. You look at what Trump did the first time he debated Joe Biden, completely blew it for himself. You look at the results of the election, that absolutely lost it for him because he was out of his mind. You look at Joe Biden, the last debate, had no mind against Donald Trump, right? Like these debates have, what he's saying here is absolutely true. The debate is the one time people don't get their echo chamber.
Yeah.
You only didn't know Joe Biden if you didn't know Joe Biden was as bad as it was, you just frankly were in an echo chamber. I mean, it's something
this drives me crazy because Democratic congressmen didn't know what was going on with Joe Biden. Like, all I had to do was watch Don Jr.'s Twitter for a year. Like, there's been just watch a speech. Like, they're not watching speeches of the president. It's crazy that people didn't know what was going on. But he's exactly right in that The Democrats want to be excited. They want to feel good. I talked about that on yesterday's show. They want to feel good about their candidate. And they, sometimes when you just sort of go along to get along and you don't want to actually look at the situation, you just want to kind of feel good. And I'm not going to spoil this by asking why she flip-flops on things and has two different beliefs on certain things, right? Like, they don't want, as Democrats, to have a vetting session. And they don't have time for it. There's 100 days at the point where they're making the decision to replace him. So they don't have time for it, and the money can't be flowed to anyone other than Kamala. So you sort of see why the party made it. But I do feel like we are Democrats love to celebrate the current thing, or you need to follow the current thing, right? There's always like a thing that the media is telling you is really important. Put out your Ukrainian flags, put out this flag, put out that flag. And there is a lot of in-step thought in terms of things that is controlled by the mainstream press. And I've said, I know on this show and have thought for the last couple of years that as other media outlets, the content game is so much different than when we started this show in 2012. We had first movers advantage in so many ways. Well, now everybody's got their own little show. And so you have people who are super rich and famous that you have never heard of that your 12-year-old knows of. It's just totally different. And so you don't have the same level of power at the Sunday shows or the CBS Evening News or in the New York Times that you once did. And so can we say, media bias, which is an old standby? I think we can, because we've just watched someone go from, in June, a pretty unpopular vice president to a once-in-a-generation candidate, according to some people, like Jonathan Chait. Like, it just, their perception of Kamala hasn't changed, or nothing about Kamala has changed, but perception about her has changed. And so I think his indictment of the media not taking its responsibility towards actual democracy, it's the way that Republicans have this fake patriotism of Lee Greenwood and fly the flag. Democrats almost have this cotton candy version of democracy, which is whatever the Democrats think is democracy, as opposed to what Robert Kennedy Jr. is arguing, which is democracy is where you have multiple voices on the stage competing, even if we only have 100 days. It's not about the Democrats winning. It's about the American people picking. And so that's why so much of this passage of his press conference really spoke to me.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, there's a reason you don't want Chase Oliver up here if you're a Democrat, like, or a Republican, really. I mean, Chase he debated Raphael Warnock, who by far was the best speaker of any of the speakers at either convention. Chase trashed him on stage. Chase beat Art Laffer in the Soho Forum. 1 in 5 people that watched that were thinking about voting for Trump said, no way I'm voting for Trump. I'll go Chase, right? 1 in 5 people. And that's in like an hour and a half long, right, debate. And then you looked at what happened at the free and equal debates where he was like against Jill Stein and what's his face.
Yeah.
And like, that was just the Chase Oliver show, right? So like when RFK Jr. is talking about debate, this is something that libertarians, while I don't agree that Kennedy would necessarily come out head above everybody else when it comes to a debate, he deserves to be on that stage. And
these
the American
candidates
people deserve to look at him or Chase Oliver and go like, oh, this guy's just
these
the best.
candidates don't obvious. Want to be indicted. Not Gabby Giffords, Tulsi Gabbard eviscerated Kamala Harris with her own record, and she was impolite about it. And so we talk a lot about norms, and norms are important. The way that you talk about other people is important. But I think as a culture, America in this point has like a, I forget who said it, but we are like a codependent nation where we're all adult alcoholics of children of adult alcoholics, of which I am, where you want to people please and make everybody happy and never bring up the tough stuff because we don't have the muscles to actually fight it out and have conversations anymore. And so we translate that into our politics where they don't want their record put in front of them. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I think the shame about Chase is that Chase is like the first homegrown libertarian messenger since Harry Brown that hasn't come from the Republican Party, really. And he never really got a fair shake, mostly out of bigotry because of his sexual identity. I mean, go look at the replies to his tweets. They're totally abhorrent. And he's never gotten a chance. And it's a shame because when you look at his messaging, he got 3% in that Senate race, in a very tight race that determined the Senate in 2022, was it? And
Yeah.
Shane
Forced the
Hazel, the Mises guy, got less than 1% in the governor's race that same cycle. So the libertarian vote didn't stay consistent between the two libertarian candidates in the same cycle. And I think if you go look at Shane's Twitter now, you'll see why.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's kind of sad. I like him personally, but man. All right, Rhinehold, go ahead.
One thing I want to bring up, though, is that we talk about how, media doesn't want to talk about the issues. But the problem is that the people don't want to hear about the issues. The people don't care about issues. And a lot of people are trying to say it's the media that's causing that. And I think that just the media is responding to
That's a fair
society
point.
is trying to say, and wanting. Because you have how many years of Trump who is completely off the wall on his policies, back and forth, left. You talk about flip-flopping or being inconsistent. I mean, he's
you
terrible
had two
about all of that
Democrats
stuff.
on stage hugging each other last night. Donald Trump was a Democrat a decade ago.
Yeah, and it you can listen to his interview with him or speech from him, and you can hear him make a statement, and then 5 minutes later he will contradict that statement, and nobody calls him out on it because everybody's just tired of it because it's constant all the time. People just don't want to even go into that anymore. They don't want to discuss it. They don't care so much about the issues. That's why it's like there's no way that we're going to get to the day of the election without. I mean, we know we're going to have a couple of debates anyway. So there's going to be times when Kamala's got to get up there and she's going to talk about a record in a debate, but it's not going to matter because it's going to be not what the people really want to hear about or care about. They're not policy wonks. They don't really. They're more about the feelings, and that's the way it's kind of been for a long time now. Yeah, nobody's really interested in that stuff. So
I think the vibes election phrase is so cringy, but I think it is true. People are voting on direction of the country and general tribal instinct, as opposed to policy
and against another. Like I want to vote against Trump, or I want to vote against Biden. Or
it's like when you see at the DNC someone, they're going to take my gay marriage away from me. Like, I just don't think that the American people are going to stand for that. Maybe some legislators in the Republican Party would try to do that, but by and large, there's no mass movement for that, right? I mean, it's a bit of fear mongering, and the Project 2025 stuff. We're not going to get into it, Rhinehold, but brilliant sloganeering and propaganda by the Democrats, but not always fair. So let's get back to Robert Kennedy Jr.
Mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters.
When he says weaponizing the agencies, does he mean going after Trump and him in court?
Yep.
Okay.
FBI, Trump, that sort of thing. Yeah.
What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the resort to censorship and media control and the weaponization of the federal agencies. when a U.S. president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression, and that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 80.
Yeah, part of what he's talking about there, if not most of it, is the push to weed out misinformation on these platforms, and of which he, with the vaccine stuff, obviously probably gets banned a lot on things.
Yeah,
but
I do get a little tired of hearing people talk about how media is censoring them. Nobody can hear what they have to say. Meanwhile, making a speech that's being carried by every news media.
Yeah, but
you see what I'm saying?
It's not as much him. It's it's election season, and so therefore I keep getting 3-day bans for memes that I posted a year ago on Instagram.
But that's not what he's talking about.
I think exactly what
his message being censored.
Yeah, but why
hear
can't,
what he has to say?
If he represents 15% of the country, why wouldn't CBS want to have him on the show to ask questions? They don't have him on, but they don't have him on and give him tough questions. That only happens on podcasts. They don't want to, the press, and I think he mentions it here, so often looks at its verification checks against misinformation as, what does the government think? Let me ask a government agency like the CDC what is misinformation or not. That's not the role of the press. They don't want to have him on because they don't want to platform him. That's why the National Association of Black Journalists, you had 2 board members quit because he came and spoke. So they don't want to platform Trump as opposed to sitting there asking him tough questions and making him slip up and giving us a key piece of Donald Trump's psychology and views on race. In one comment, you understand exactly what he meant, right? And that's why people like him, because he's racist, or they hate him because he's racist, right? That's the point of actually interviewing somebody like Robert Kennedy and pointing out, like, hey, isn't the study on autism being caused by vaccines, the research that you use, outdated by about 50 years, but you keep using it? So he should be interviewed. She should be interviewed. Kamala Harris should be out there giving interviews every day, and if she screws up, then we should see the actual person that is running for president, not some glitzy, glamorous presentation where Barack Obama and Bill Clinton do the heavy lifting, because they gave amazing speeches, and Kamala Harris was totally forgettable in her speech. But she, as I said yesterday, I view her as like the Vinny Testaverde of presidential candidates. She's gonna do well. She's gonna be a solid journeyman, but she's not Tom Brady like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, or Michelle Obama for that matter, who killed it. Go ahead. Let Rhinehold respond, and then Hodey weigh in.
No, I'm just, like I said, there's discussion being made about all that stuff and whether or not that's what people want to hear. That's why the press isn't doing that stuff, because people don't want to hear that stuff, really. But he's trying to say he's specifically being targeted for censorship by the media when they're literally carrying what he has to say all the time. And they do report on it. There's articles in New York Times and Washington Post about stuff he says. And whenever he says the media, he's always talking about the left.
Yeah, but
he's not talking about Fox News and Newsmax and all that other stuff.
But that's because so much of how the media operates now is derision and framing and focusing on a negative story about Donald Trump, and then on their side, like, Kamala's joyous, and that's everywhere. Donald Trump is losing it. Donald Trump definitely is not the same person he was in 2016. There's no doubt about it. But if you open up Memorandum, which is a site that I use all the time, it shows how this narrative of Donald Trump is falling apart. His campaign is falling apart. It's almost like voter suppression in a way, right? The media is doing the heavy lifting for Democrats and not for Republicans. They're not taking them seriously. Robert Kennedy Jr., maybe there's some stuff on vaccines that he's right about. Maybe there's a lot of stuff he's wrong about. But instead of pretending that he's just the weird uncle we're going to ignore, let's get into it. Instead, they're leaving this up to podcasters like Joe Rogan, who don't know how to fact check, who don't know how to have somebody come on and rebut it.
At some point, how do they use their limited resources in covering a crank who gets so much stuff wrong and is completely, off? It's like having a conversation about, global warming, but we got to include the flat Earth people in, because that wouldn't be fair if we didn't have their word in and hear what they have to say.
But people believe that. Why wouldn't you want to have people come on and try to refute the dome and the ether and all? Like, people believe this stuff. And the further we've tried to root misinformation out of the public square, the more entrenched it becomes.
I think it's been the other way around. We spent so many years trying to do a balanced journalism where you say, okay, let's bring on someone else who has a different point of view and see what they have to say, even though they're completely off in left field, and that's allowed that stuff to grow and fester. Instead of the press saying, hey, no, this is wrong. This is, here's all the facts and all the reasons why it's wrong in a huge article, but nobody reads that, right? So
the way I'm built is I like to take everybody seriously and take them at their word. Maybe it's a flaw of mine, but I tend to just look at people and go, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and then pull apart what they actually are arguing.
Yeah. But then Paul does have a point too. Is like, what I was trying to say is that he's trying to say that nobody covers him, nobody gives him interview, that stuff. But he also said that he does 10 interviews a day.
Right.
So who's doing these interviews if the press isn't doing it?
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean,
Paul says, except me, you never take me seriously. Paul, I responded to you and gave you, I do take you seriously, but I also like having fun mocking you, and vice versa. Paul was going on about science and something, and I just, I don't even disagree with him. I always just like to poke, and I'm like, how can I make him rage quit? Because he gets so worked up about like science misinformation, and it's like galt. It makes me laugh. Go ahead, Hodey, before we keep going.
Yeah, I think I'll just keep it simple. Chase is at his best when he has a Republican or a Democrat next to him. Chase by himself is fine, but when he's scorching somebody, it's when he's next to somebody. I'm with you on this one. Put the crazy out there. Let people tear apart crazy for what it is, and it's absolutely how things used to operate. You read a book like The Guarded Gate, and you look at how they needed to repress dissent in order to pass the things that they do. And everything's fine when we take the crazy person, put them on stage and make them look crazy. I will say this, as far as bias goes, look right now. I mean, there are over 50 members, senior intelligence officers, FBI, CIA people that signed a document saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story is fake. How are you supposed to think, if you're a Republican, then that everybody's not out to get you, right? Because that ended up being very real. Not only that, we actually have evidence now that they knew it was real. They signed a knowing falsified lie. You look up that story, look who's actually running that story. You'll find one story on PBS, one on NBC. You'll find 100 on, some podcaster's site. The thing is, if it's true, then people deserve to know that. And you look at how carefully the DNC curates all this information, right? Just being you may not ask this question. You may not look into this. We won't have a debate unless you ask this, that, or the other. Now, the Republicans do this too. In fact, one of the things that's lost on the whole Twittergate thing is that the Republicans actually sent more requests to take down things than the Democrats even did. Elon Musk, by the way, is more compliant with taking down posts and information than the last regime even was. So I want to pop that bubble right now. I'm not trying to take a side.
Please, no, Rhinehold didn't take his blood pressure medicine. You can't say things like that in front of him.
Well, no, but I mean, I'm giving him, I'm sure he knows, right, that Elon Musk is even more compliant.
Finish your point real quick, because we got to keep going.
That's I agree with too, but I'm saying the Hunter Biden thing, there's more to that story than even that I don't think you guys even know about. I've been researching that one for years, and it's not true and it's not false. There's a lot of in-betweens.
Yeah, the laptop apparently was actually... It's real, but there's also 2 laptops, and one of them had a lot of extra juice. So we're not going to get into that because we're at 50 minutes, and
Check out Lev Parnas. He was involved in all of that, and he's given the details.
Cassandra,
so there's a lot more to it.
Over at YouTube says, broadcasting opinions is great, but we don't see facts as much. And of course, here we are on this show. But I just read a great book by Marvin Olasky called Pivot Points, and it's sort of his evolution from a communist to a Christian journalist who ran World Magazine, which is awesome, and then eventually was let go because of the Trump era, because they basically started to put business and opinion first as opposed to on-the-ground reporting. And this is a fundamental problem. Like, this is, again, part of the problem that I have with the media-biased argument is that most of talk radio is on the backs of straight reporting. They're pulling up mainstream news articles and then going nuh-uh or giving their opinion on it. We rely on on-the-ground reporting, but part of why people are so confused about things is that everything is opinion, because that makes these outlets more money than actual on-the-ground reporting. And again, back to Rhinehold's point, that's what people want, so they're going to give it to him. Paul says, you know how to get directly to the muscle tissue under my skin. It's a gift. I got it from my dad.
8% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press, and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks exposed themselves as Democratic Party organs over the course of more than a year in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s. The DNC-allied mainstream media networks maintain a near-perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power, instead of maintaining that posture of fierce skepticism toward authority. Your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship.
All right, first off, not one of these candidates is going to save American democracy, okay? RFK Jr., not the savior of democracy. Kamala Harris, not the savior of democracy. Again, 8 years in Russia, democratic reforms were built. Putin gets in office, it takes him 20 years to pull down democracy in Russia after 8 years of building. We have 250 years as a democracy and a republic. It's going to take a lot more than Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, RFK to destroy American democracy or to save it. You can be active in American democracy, and I get it. Donald Trump represents something that is fundamentally a different choice in how we're going to govern by supercharging the executive branch out of grievance. But the next guy we're about to speak really did a lot of executive orders, didn't he? And so will Kamala Harris. And so
that's what my point is that we've been fighting against democracy for decades now.
Yeah. It's not one person. It's not just one.
No.
Yeah. It's
what I'm saying is that you talk about how it took 20 years for Putin to take down democracy. How long have we been taking down democracy in this country?
Yeah, but how long think of the suffrage of how many groups now vote and aren't disenfranchised. I mean,
That's true, but
there's an
we also
expansion
have
of liberty in so many areas in this society.
Yeah, the League of Women Voters had to disband because the Council on Debates came into power and they couldn't do debates anymore like they used to. The press used to go after Nixon hard, like that sort of thing. And then now they're soft pedaling and stuff. Then they go after Trump and they're being told they're being too hard on Trump and they should back off on that. And then so the press is lowering and lowering their job of holding power to account for years.
Well, they have less power themselves.
Yeah. So then what happens is that, so like I said, we've been kind of going down that track for a long time. And no, I don't think we're there tomorrow. I don't think if Trump gets into office that immediately it all goes out the window, but there will be a big jump towards that. I think so, but it's still it's always really, and a lot of people, and we talk about this a lot especially with this, it's still the people who are in control, whether they realize it or not, and they utilize it or not, they still have the power. Mm-hmm. If you watch what people can do when they really come together and they can eliminate New Coke in a span of a couple months. If the people really combine and want something and do it, there's nothing that can really stop them. And we just stop ourselves is what happens.
Yeah, I think if you look at
we talk about
civil rights took 10 years to change American society on a better trajectory. Me Too, over 2 to 3 years, changed, I think, a lot of cultural norms in a positive direction in just a brief period of time. So yeah, I do agree. There's a lot of power there. All right, let's continue on.
Social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doty's previous 155-page decision details how just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency, it's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, and it's joined this systemic attack on democracy. The media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation, but governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up with. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we living up? Are we really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke?
All right. Final thoughts on RFK.
First one is the initial statement. He said that he thinks he could have won this election is delusional. He would not have had any chance of winning this election. Second,
yeah, but why? I mean, didn't he
Just
then lay
because
out why?
he's not, his views aren't as popular enough to grab a majority
But why?
vote. But why what?
But why aren't his views popular?
Other than the fact that they're, mostly insane.
I'm being
just-
playing devil's advocate to point out, like,
I know.
he's laying out the case. Well, like, if you take me off the ballot and then never give me interviews, and then I have no chance. Separate RFK from the vaccine stuff. That's the challenge for all third-party candidates. I mean, that's the entire reason that a like these debates, Hodey and I kind of went back and forth on it at one point. Media outlets have limited time for a debate. And so they have 30 minutes, usually, maybe an hour. And you've got to give everybody fair and equal time. So you give each candidate 2 minutes to answer a question. So they go, well, we could include the third-party candidate, but they're not going to win. So let's just take them out so we can get the answers from the people who are actually going to govern, as opposed to putting the third-party candidate in and letting people hear what their ballot says, because the Libertarian Party in Indiana, for instance, is on the ballot. But they've made the decision that it's not worth your time to hear them. It's not worth their time, literally, because they want to make sure that they can get the maximum amount of people watching, get them the most information. And that's why these debate commissions, the Indiana Debate Commission, is incredibly important, because in their bylaws, they say you have to include everybody that's on your ballot. And killing that off is a huge mistake, because now what you've done is you've given it back to the local TV station that demands you raise $100,000 to get on the ballot, which Don Rainwater could do and did. But there's a lot of other people that don't make that. And then when they show up to vote, they go, oh, there's a third choice. Wonder what that guy believes. Right? Because people don't pay attention. Like I was talking to somebody the other day who said, yeah, I just found out like 3 days ago that Kamala Harris is now the nominee. Like literally hadn't heard in a month that any of this had happened. So just checked out. She said, I get all my news from you. I was like, oh boy. I do appreciate that trust. Mm-hmm. And I take it seriously. But I think the entire argument that he's presenting there is right. I mean, maybe RFK doesn't represent the views of a lot of people, but this country has a dozen different directions that it wants to go in political views that could be put on our ballot. And he just articulated why that doesn't happen.
Right. But here's the thing, too, is that our country also has so many more ways to get messaging and media and information across, that the fact that him and he's getting poll numbers like that is kind of goes against his point. Right. I mean, I am 100% in agreement with the debate stuff and news media trying to carry and give the information out there. But also he couches his actual good points in such kind of paranoid drivel that it's really hard to take him as seriously as I think you're wanting us to do.
I mean, why wouldn't you take somebody seriously who has grown in influence, especially post-COVID and the way that COVID was handled? Why wouldn't you take him seriously? Because if you want to teach people not to believe what he believes, you've got to actually take him seriously. You cannot deride someone out of the race. This is, I think, an important point of why Kamala Harris is starting to be successful, where Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden haven't been. Although Joe Biden beat him, Hillary Clinton just mocked him, put him down, obsessed over him a little bit, talked down to Trump, played it, kind of lazily because she didn't think she had to, and she lost to him. Joe Biden was going to lose this race because he was like, we all need to be really afraid of this guy. He took him too seriously. Kamala's most effective line in that speech the other night was, he's an unserious person, but we do need to take it seriously that he's running for office. Right? They're taking him seriously, but they're also treating him unseriously. Right.
And like I said, I'm not saying he doesn't have points to make. I'm just saying that his points become harder to digest because of the paranoia stuff that he's got going on, where they're all after him, they're all out to get him, they're gonna keep him out. The fact that he's out saying it and people are hearing him saying it and is being carried by all the news media, goes right against that whole paranoia argument. Yeah, the media does try to pick and choose who they give their time and effort to, because it takes a lot of work to get that stuff out. It takes a lot of work to cover somebody and to do all this stuff. So they do have to pick and choose. You can't just give everybody a voice, because that's what social media is. And look how, cacophonous and a lot of waste of time that is. But it's still, they still need to be doing that. But like I said, he actually hurts his arguments, I think, sometimes because of that, by adding that stuff on top of it. The weaponizing the FBI to go after Trump. Why is he bringing that stuff up in this case? Because that's not what's going on. And that's more of a conspiratorial thing. And it's an argument against a side of the government that they're trying to fight against as populist. They see the anybody who's in power as being the elite or whatever, even though when they're in power, they don't see themselves as that, which is frustrating as well. But what do you think, Hodey, as we're waiting for? I'm starting a monologue here at this point. I figured I'd see what you had to say about it.
No, I mean, I agree. I think it should be a debate. I think bad ideas should be debated and should be torched on a debate stage. I think some of the reason bad ideas hang around is because they don't get debated. Like I said, when you look at the history of immigration restriction in America and how misinformation and the inability to debate and shutting down debate against that really perpetuated its ability to survive despite its unpopularity and despite the scientific community rallying against it. Without the ability to debate it, there was nothing. And we look at how debates have shaped everything. I think if RFK had a moment, because like we talk about his vaccine misinformation and lies, most people don't know specifically what those lies are because it hasn't been a debate, because it hasn't been addressed specifically.
Yeah, it's just creating a general just create a general environment of distrust.
Right. Yep. Right. Just say, we dismissed him out of hand. Well, why not just dismiss him in hand? Right. Why not just be like this right here information is what, like you spreading anti-Semitic nonsense, this statement here, this is why you're not getting into the debate. You know what I mean? Like I would even appreciate that. But instead it's just like, because he's crazy. Well, you know what? You know who else lies? Kamala Harris and Donald Trump constantly. Like and these people deserve to be called out for it, and they deserve to be called out for it on a national stage. We don't deserve to have a GOP and a DNC that are constantly censoring these questions. If we're going to participate in the debate, make sure this doesn't get brought up, make sure that doesn't get brought up. We deserve a fair, honest, hard media that is willing to take them to task, and we'll have it. But who does it? Podcasters, right? Like that.
That's the other problem I have too, is that, okay, we want to have this debate. Great. Who's moderating the debate? How's this debate handling? If you're talking scientific issues, like you say, vaccines and whether they work or not, or autism and everything, who's handling that moderation of that debate and fact checking it real time as it's happening? So somebody isn't just getting up there and just saying this stuff, and then you can't counter it because it's like the pigeon on the chessboard, right? They just knock all the pieces over and say they won. So who is doing that? And this media that we have right now is not capable of doing it, especially on the hard science stuff. They've got to have people who have that knowledge and understanding that can counter and talk about that. And the only people who are doing that in like some of the vaccine stuff and the COVID stuff are people who are actual virologists. And there's a podcast out there with virologists where they talk about this stuff and they counter it. But then you go to the 30,000 other podcasts that are just reinforcing all the stuff that they're trying to fight against, and they're not going to get any coverage for that. So,
but part of that is because it feels like that's part of what it feels like, forbidden knowledge. And so when you say don't go listen to Alex Jones, and people tune in and they see Sandy Hook stuff, and they, the looping around the building video. The first time I saw that, I was like, oh. Or it's like the Tim Walz thing, right? Tim Walz pulling his son's hand. It reinforces your view that he's like, he's really secretly not a good guy, right? He's actually really probably beats his wife, and his family life isn't that happy. This fits my narrative. But he's pulling his son's arm because of a teleprompter because he was about to walk into it, right? That's why I think Community Notes on Twitter has done a good job of it feels fair in the way that they fact check. It's not, we're just going to always fact check the right because they're always misinformation, they're lying, blah, blah, blah. It's like when you get a fact check on somebody that's on the left wing, it's like, oh, okay, this feels more serious. I don't know. We've sort of, again, that's why I think like moving Trump or Alex Jones off in 2017, it like, what it does is it makes it feel like secret forbidden knowledge. That's why I think so many right-wingers look at what goes on in the European right. It feels new and different and novel, and it's attractive because it's new, different, and novel, and it's naughty because of its racism, right? There's an attraction there because it's not the same old thing that I know didn't work for me, which is Bush-style conservatism, right? When we take things and make them more alluring by banning them. We've gone way over time, so what we're going to do is we're going to split this into part 1 and part 2, so stay tuned for part 2 later this week. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Hey, if you got something out of this, please go support us over at Patreon. The link is in the show description. I'm doing a daily show, at least I'm just testing it out through the election. It's a lot of work this week, but a lot of fun, and so check out if you enjoyed this, got some insights, then please support us. It does take some time to put in the work to figure out what we want to say here. You got to input to output, right? So check that out. We'd appreciate your support. And thanks to Hodey and Rhinehold for being here. We appreciate you guys. And thank you, listener, for being here. We'll see you again next week.